All right, it's 10:19. Thank you for staying with us. This is KPRC 2 News at 10. And we have been helping to get you guys classroom ready. You guys are classroom ready. The kids are back in school. So we're going to be talking about some new safety laws that will affect, their safety in schools.
That's right. Obviously a very important topic, given where we are in history at this point. We've got Amy and Robert with us to talk about that. But beforehand, you guys both have kids in school. How is your back to school going?
Go ahead.
I mean, mine's going well. So I have a 7th grader, a 2nd grader, and a 4th grader. But so far, all good. I mean, I just got an alarm clock for my 7th grader because he's decided to start cross country. And then after he tried out, then we found out practice is every day at 6:30 in the morning. Oh, yeah. So now he has an alarm clock.
You love the morning practices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here anyway, but go ahead and wake up.
And he's been doing okay.
Well, today was the first practice. Tryouts were last Thursday.
Okay.
And he made it, and I mean, he made it and he's excited about it. Yeah, so I'm excited that he's excited. Yeah.
New routine. How about you?
I am great. I have a 4th grader and a kindergartner. So yes, it is awesome. And Colin is part of Safety Patrol this year, so he has to be there early to help put the flag up and everything. And he loves it. He's raring to go every morning, excited about it. Alyssa loves school, just adores it. But she's not an early morning riser. She's a roll out of bed, get dressed, grab her waffle, hit the door. Colin's more, he's up and ready to go and at him. So, but everybody's really happy, loves their teachers.
Yeah.
What a great picture.
There you go.
That's
so cute.
See, she was like, first day. I was getting used to that early morning alarm clock. Called mom.
It's funny how they're all so different, aren't they?
Yes, yes.
One sibling does not predict the next.
Right. No.
It does not.
Absolutely not.
So different.
We've already had a couple of screaming matches doing homework. I mean, I like homework. I like when kids come home with homework because at least I know what they're working on.
Right.
But then I'm like, why did I say I wanted this? Because, my daughter.
How do I help?
I don't know if I'm remembering or not. Did you have this much in elementary school? Because it seems like Colin has a ton. I mean, it hasn't really hit Alyssa yet, but it's just like, I didn't remember having that much in like 3rd, 4th grade.
The last 2 years, my children's teachers were like, no homework. And I was like, really? I mean, they're like, we'll finish it in school. And it's like, how will I know if they're having a problem understanding it? So I like some, but then when they're having a problem understanding it, particularly math, it's not my best subject.
Math. And they do it differently. Math isn't what math was.
No. Yeah. So I don't know how. I mean, if I'd had Google when I was in school, I would have been much better at math. Right. It's like, now I see what they're asking.
We have to shut down like Alexa. We have like the dot and the little one for like, and he instantly gets it. If he doesn't know something, he's like, Alexa. We're like,
no, Robert.
No.
I mean,
we have to
I'm there to help with homework.
You have to learn this.
I'm using Google.
You're the one.
Well, that's okay for us. That's
right. It's so bad at my house. My 6th grader was like, Mom, can you help me with this math problem? I looked at it and then I started trying, and she's like, you know what? I'm just going to wait for Dad to get home. Okay.
See, it's the exact opposite in my house. I'm English. In my wife's math, because she's the one with the MBA. It's the complete opposite in my house.
It's nice to have one of each expert in the house. Hey, look, we started this segment off talking about some of the changes that these schools are facing this year that all of our kids are going to. And I think this has been somewhat confusing for parents because we've got a few different bills that have passed. Within those bills, there's different rules.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand a little bit of that?
So House Bill 3 was one of the biggest ones. It's like 39 pages long. So only one of the things in House Bill 3 that passed, that took effect September 1st, says that there's supposed to be one armed with a gun and trained police officer or what they call a school guardian, some employee that is, trained to be on a school campus carrying a gun. And that is in there. And September 1st, they were supposed to have those. But what we reached out to 23 different districts in our area and said, hey, who has this already? And, middle schools and high schools, they've had that for a long time. School resource officers that are usually carrying guns. So that's not really new. But for elementary schools, I mean, think about how many elementary schools are in some of these larger districts and how much of an outlay that would be to pay for an armed officer to be there during all of the hours of school.
It's daunting. There's 8,973 school campuses in the state of Texas. I mean, that's a huge number.
So only 9 of the school districts that we sent, out of the 23, said that they have a licensed officer or school guardian already in place for every single campus. And those are the smaller districts. Those are like the Magnolia, Montgomery, Sheldon, Alief, Clear Creek, LaPorte, but like the big ones like HISD, Cy-Fair, Fort Bend, Katy, I mean, they're all either still working on it or they're like, we're going to take this exception that says that we can and like just go with some other type of plan.
Yeah, because the law does allow for what's called a good cause exception, that if the school board votes on here's why we don't have armed response on every single campus, but here's our backup plan, then it's allowed.
Okay, so Robert, you were talking about new laws on police training earlier this morning. So talk about that and how that is also in correlation to this.
Well, another part of House Bill 3 that I tackled was really a direct response to what we saw in Uvalde. Because if you remember, you had like 376 officers from 19 different departments all converge on Robb Elementary, and none of them had trained together, none of them had discussed a coordinated response together, and it was a horrible response. What happened? So one of the other things that House Bill 3 does now is if you're in a county with a population below 350,000, the sheriff of that county now has to have semi-annual meetings with schools to discuss coordinated response, emergency response, active shooter response, and everything. And that applies to a vast majority of the state. There's only like 17 counties out of 254 counties in Texas that has a population above 350,000. So this really does apply to a good chunk of the state. Then you have Senate Bill 999, which ensures that the type of active shooter response training at schools is standardized. It was to a large extent, but the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement pointed out to lawmakers that there are still some companies that are providing this type of training that's not necessarily with a curriculum that's approved by the state of Texas. So now this makes sure that everybody, companies, as well as trainers and everybody's certified up to state standards in this school-based active shooter response training. Then you have Senate Bill 1852, which now requires that 16 hours of active shooter response training be part of the basic police officer training course. And then it also requires every officer in the state to get that 16 hours every 2 years as part of their 40-hour required continuing education.
Very important.
So a lot more on training and talking to each other and coordinating responses.
Boy, you know, and I think, at least for most parents, you're thinking, hey, at least we're making some progress, because you can't
do everything
Right.
tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other ones that I thought were interesting in House Bill 3 when I started looking through it were just more about communication and more communicating with parents and everyone in the school district. So, for example, they say any act of violence or violent incident on a school campus or during a school activity where, you know, a school-sponsored coordinated activity. If anything happens, like think about school fights.
Right.
I mean, in middle schools and high schools, and you know, a lot of times parents weren't hearing about that until their kid came home from school and maybe said something about it. It said that those schools are supposed to notify parents and community members about these incidents. Now, when we reached out and asked all these districts, like, so are you guys doing that? And one district said, well, we're waiting for the TEA to tell us sort of how to do that, like the guidelines. But the TEA said there will be guidelines forthcoming, but they could go ahead and do it. Like, however, if parents have set up that I want to
anything's better than nothing. Send
I
out
want
an
to be
email.
communicated with by email, by text. I'm sure schools are, you know, identifying students. They're kind of thinking about, okay, how are we doing this without...
And it brings up a great point for parents to be able to go and ask those questions.
Yes.
What are you doing at your school?
Right.
It also builds off of a lot of the laws that were passed after the Santa Fe shooting. A lot of the laws that were passed after the Santa Fe shooting were geared towards threat detection. You have to have these behavioral assessment teams in place. You have to assess whether or not this is the type of threatening behavior that could spiral into violence and then immediately address it. So we had the threat detection after Santa Fe. Now we're seeing more of the training discussing coordinated response to, you know, what at one point was the unthinkable.
And are you talking about that part of the threat detection for individual students? Because there's a piece of it.
Senate, that was out of Senate Bill 11 after Santa Fe.
Okay.
Those threat detection teams. And I just got data back from the TEA the last school year. These teams across the state received more than 80,000 threats. Now, fortunately, only a very tiny fraction required police interaction.
Because the one that I was talking about, also House Bill 3, says that if a child moves from one school district to another.
That was a gap from the first one. You're right.
Yeah.
That was great. That's great pointing out that that threat assessment has to move with them because it didn't before. They would have to, the other district would have to request.
Like if a
Now
kid
it's
had
automatic.
problems in a district or a district had reason to believe that they were a threat or some sort of behavior, they have to tell the new school district where the kid is going about his history or
That's
her
a good
history.
one. Listen, you can see Amy and Robert's stories at click2houston.com. Thank you guys for hanging out with us on our new show and the growing pains and some of the fun.
Sharing all that
chatting
awesome
about today.
information,
Very
too.
important.